Okay.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Marie Bryant Mosby, and welcome to My Life's Purpose. For the last couple of months, we have been talking about, have you placed yourself in a personal recession? Meaning that, have you placed yourself where you stopped giving yourself that needed care, taking yourself to the doctor. We had spoke about going to your PCP, getting a mammogram. October is Breast Awareness Month, and we want to let you know that it's important for not only women to go and have a mammogram, but men as well, going to do get your colon checked, check on your prostate. And so one of the things we also did last month is I had a guest, and it was actually my daughter, and she spoke about going to the beauty shop and getting your hair checked, your skin checked, because a lot of times, one of the things was with Tiffany Haddish, she had gone and she had shaved her head off so she could check her scalp. And this is something that is very important when you go to the beautician, that they check your scalp, because you don't know, you could have anything that, a mold or anything, even to go and have a massage, get your skin. She's an esthetician, so she also checks on individual skin care, and that was one of the things that we spoke about as well. And so moving on to the barbershop, one of my fondest memories was going to the barbershop with my dad. And some of you might remember when you went to the barbershop and you would get the Covadis haircut. Some of you, I think, might be a little bit younger, so you may not know what the Covadis is, but it's just the up-to-date fade. So today, who I have with me, I am so honored to have a Black man with me, educated Black man. Let me say that again, educated Black man with me today from Iota Fraternity. If I could get you gentlemen to introduce yourself, give us a little bit about your background. And so I'm going to, anyone who wants to start, the youngest to the oldest maybe.
So Sean.
No, I'm the youngest. No.
All
right, one moment, guys. I got to show my video for this one. How's it going? So my name is Sean Anderson. I'm a current Morgan State University student studying electrical engineering in my junior year. As far as what I want to do for work and things like that, I don't know, any things that transmit signals, RF, cell phone, frequency, all that good stuff, engineering. Just a little bit.
Welcome.
Hobbies. I'm sorry.
So I guess that puts me next. I'm Marcus Reed, member of Iota Theta Fraternity Incorporated. I'm a human service worker for the state of Maryland, helping individuals with disabilities get back into the workforce. Was not a graduate of Morgan State University, unfortunately.
Can't all be great.
Okay, who's next?
I'm 57, so where's that put me?
You're younger.
Well, you can be next. That's fine.
My name is Fitzhugh Alfred. I'm the Director of Radiology and Nuclear Medicine at the University of Maryland Midtown campus. I'm a graduate of Howard University and the University of Baltimore. I currently am a proud member of Iota Phi Theta Fraternity Incorporated, and I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. Sir?
Okay, I'll go. My name is Craig Spencer. I am a graduate of Morgan State University. You can probably see my banner in the background there, my paraphernalia I have on, but I'm a vice president with M&T Bank here in Baltimore, and I'm a proud member of Iota Phi Theta Fraternity Incorporated. I've been a member for 40 years. currently serve as the Director of Graduate Affairs. I'm a husband, I'm a father, and glad to be part of this panel discussions. Thank you.
Thank you. And I also have with me here tonight is Patrick, and Patrick is our therapist. And a lot of times we don't know that there are Black therapists available to us. So Patrick, if you could please introduce yourself and give us a little bit of history about yourself.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it. My name is Patrick Crawford. I'm currently a PhD student at Morgan State University. I am hopefully graduating in May. And I have attended Delaware State University for my master's, and I got my undergrad from Salisbury University. I'm a father, I'm a husband. I am a licensed clinician in the state of Maryland, the District of Columbia, and a couple of other jurisdictions. I do program evaluations. I do a lot of clinical supervision, and I'm a certified N2 psychotherapist. So I have a host of credentials, but I'm really just a person that looks to understand people and to assist them in the process of being their best, being the best they can be. So that's what I strive to do, and that's me.
Thank you. Thank you so much, gentlemen. So I'm just going to get started with questions that I have gotten from other people, some of them that, we all want to know the answers to. So Black men and their masculinity. I want to talk about the expectation of the Black man. How many of the young Black men are expected to, I know when I was growing up, I heard my father say this quite a bit, live by my rules or get out, get a job. Also the representation versus the white, Black men versus white men, what the expectation is, and the portrayal of the perception seen by our society for Black men. So it's if anybody just wants to comment on those, or all of you could comment on them. Let's go ahead and get started with the answers to some, maybe feedback to some of these questions that we have out there.
Let's see. The first one. Yes, my parents, well, more so my mother. My mom was married, but she was pretty much a single mother most of my childhood. Had a rule. When you turned 18, you either went to college or you were out on your own. But it wasn't the same rules for my sister. And she had 4 boys. So there was that expectation that you either worked or you went off to college. That was your saving grace.
Okay, anybody else want to add to that?
Well, I'll add to it. I grew up in almost what I call a single parent household. My father raised my brother and I, and my mother passed away when we was very young. So it was a different experience growing up, without a mother. And I often wonder, what type of man I would have become had I had a mother figure in my life. But my father, he tried to fill both of those roles as best he could. And I had other relatives, other aunts, and that would step in to help raise us. But it definitely was different growing up without a mother. But I can say that my father, from the very beginning, has always been very supportive of my brother and I, and until this day, he's still supportive of us. So, that was the experience that I had growing up. As far as the difference between a Black and a white man, I think that was your question. That's a whole nother interesting dynamic, when you talk about, a Black man versus a white man, having been in corporate America, my entire career, over 30 years, it's been an interesting dynamic in just, competing, for positions, competing for competitive salaries, being recognized for your worth. that's a constant battle, if you will.
Yeah. I'm gonna come back around to that, Craig.
Okay.
But was it harder for you because you didn't have a mom? Do you think your dad, because it was just, you know, your dad raising you, do you think you were I don't know, a better person because, you know, you had that father figure, and or a stronger person?
That's hard to answer, Ms. Mosley. I mean, I can say that my father was always supportive, to almost to the point where he used to spoil my brother and I. You know, he made sure that we had everything that we didn't want for anything. You know, I just remember Christmas would roll around and we would have all the toys, and maybe actually overcompensated, if you will. You know, because my mother, wasn't there, but he definitely raised us to be strong men. He raised us to be competitive. I consider myself a very competitive person, and having played sports all my life, and playing in college, and so he instilled that characteristic, if you will, in my brother and I, to be the best we could be. So
Yeah. And I know you and Marcus both said that you were from single parent household, and I had both of my parents, and for the girls, as Marcus said, it was a lot easier being that we were the girls, but for my brother, it was a whole different ball game for him, and sometimes I have to wonder, when I sit back and look at it, was it better for him or was it not? And the hardness that my dad had displayed on my brother, I guess, to make him a better man. So does anybody else want to have an input? Patrick, I see you look like you want to say something, add to that, and please, whenever, because you're the professional, and I want your input, please.
Okay, so the interesting thing is that being raised by a single mother, the one thing that I challenge myself in is the term masculinity, especially when you start to add in race and culture into defining masculinity. I think that the biggest challenge is, are there foundational similarities between Black boys and Black and white boys and how they ascend to manhood? I think that there are some similar traits. I just think that the process of accomplishing them are very, very different. And I also believe that masculinity is not monolithic in its approach when it comes to how, as a Black man, or I'll say as a Black man for myself, and how white men subscribe to their manhood or masculinity. But I say that to say that one of the things that I believe is that we are all taught from an early age, and I think it's sometimes shaped by the generations, because I believe masculinity is evolving. At one point in time, it was get a job, become financially successful, make sure you're strong, make sure you have power with regard to being able to accomplish yourself as a Black man. I don't think that is one of the things that may be ascribed to for our counterparts or for white men. But I believe that as a Black man, there are certain things that are stressed upon us that we really have to subscribe to as it relates to just accomplishment. And while I think that's one aspect of masculinity, I think there are others that have to become a part of that process. Me, myself, I think I'm still in the process of, of solidifying my masculinity, not because I have doubts, but because I think there's so much more to who we are than just our cognitive knowledge of knowing what makes us masculine and what makes us men. I hope I wasn't too wordy. My apologies for that.
No, fine. We wanted to get, anybody else wanted to comment on that, or?
Well,
I wanted to say that I was raised in downtown Baltimore. My father died when I was 12. So the examples I had with reference to masculinity, the examples I had, I don't think were very good. As I found out later in life, they weren't very good examples of masculinity, because as I was coming up, being tough, being, covering up your feelings, showing that you are a hard person, and kind of pushing through whatever happens to you. You just have to show that you're macho,
Yeah.
and I came through that, through my life. When my mother raised my sister and I, and we, I was the man after he passed away in the house, and I was bringing that from the streets of Baltimore. I was sometimes bringing that into my house, and my mother was always trying to correct me and trying to do what she could, as trying to raise a young black man. And I really didn't see any other examples of masculinity, or what a man really is, really, until I went to college. It was there were a lot of examples. I played a little football in college, and some of that was carried over into that. But then I saw different, different types of men, where I grew up, that wasn't the example. And so I started, I would say, morphing or evolving to, I don't need to be this tough, hard joker from East Baltimore. I can be a man in other ways. And I learned that, and still learning it in some ways now. But I definitely learned that in college, and through that whole college life, I kind of changed some of the things that I grew up learning.
And that's one of the things I was going to ask. Why was it, I know I've heard it. Why is it so important for men or black men to have that saying that men don't cry, and feeling that it is not okay for you to express a feeling of crying, when sometimes it's okay, and we need to learn that as individuals, that it's okay to show emotion as a black man and say, hey, I need some help, because sometimes you all do, and
Yeah.
I want to, when that help is needed, we as black women have to step in and say, okay, this is what I'm gonna do. When you're up there, I'm gonna praise you, but when you need that shoulder, I'm here with you as well. And a lot of times we don't. And that's just something that I wanted to put out there for our women, that we have to learn how to be a little bit more supportive to our men.
Part of that mannerism comes from, I know for me, the support systems that I had, my uncles. One is Puerto Rican, moved to the States, worked 3 jobs, and my other uncle, who was in the military. Basically, it was, this world wasn't, it wasn't set up for you to succeed, so you're going to have to be doubly tough in order to handle this. So as a black man, you had to have that hard exterior, that nothing bothered you. You had to work extra hard. And so I know when we discussed this in setting it up, there's been a lot of people who post, well, the question on Facebook was, who do men go to when they are stressed or they're troubled? And most of us answered, no one, or a very small core of individuals. Because we care so much about our extremities, it's an idea of not wanting to seem weak. When you're supposed to be, the head of your family, you're supposed to be the rock. And the saying that, what happens when strong isn't enough anymore? We have to be those things because those are the expectations. And if we miss that mark, it's, oh, you're not a man now. or if you show emotion, you're not a man now. But you don't realize that all these other extrinsic notions and ideas of who you need to be in America, or just in a family structure, weighs heavily on us. And it's hard because I know for me, my mom couldn't understand and ask the hard questions when I would say things about this. I know for us, like, there's things that we didn't learn. Like, we didn't talk about sex, we didn't talk about a lot of things in the household. One, it was a single mom. Two, we were in the church, so she expected you to be these perfect Christian boys. And it was just like, just work, go hard, and play sports. It was just, that's what you were supposed to do. There's no crying. It's not okay for you to be emotional. Mm-hmm. And I think what we see now is that we end up with grown men who are broken boys.
And I'm going to come back to that, Marcus, because that's something. But I want to move on to what Craig was talking about earlier. I was just in a conversation with someone online, and we were talking about the workplace. And I know myself, when I go to work, or whatever I do, I try to come in and be 120%. But then my coworker can come in and only give 75%, and it's okay. And when will it not be okay? And how do you all feel about when you go to work and you have to give more than what your coworkers do?
Well, I can say, I mean, up until recently, and it's interesting, because of the whole social and racial unrest, these tough, crucial conversations are happening between our colleagues. But up until that point, it was just something that you just did. You knew you had to work harder, and it's something that you accepted. And I'm speaking from my personal experience. I knew I had to work harder. I knew I had to work, be sharp and be on all the time. And it's just how I carried myself. And I mean, maybe there was some resentment there, but I didn't express that with anybody. I kind of kept that to myself. I've been fairly successful in my career, if one would look from the outside looking in, but it wasn't something that you just talked about all the time. But we're talking about it now, particularly with my company, since the whole social and racial unrest, we're talking about breaking down these lines of communication and kind of understanding how we feel, understanding the pressures, that a Black man feels when they walk into their office every day. Trying to understand how a white man feels, when they're interacting with a Black man. So all these conversations are taking place now, and it's pretty interesting. It really is. And it's all around race. I think one of the things we hear now is, how to be an anti-racist. Never heard that term before.
Yeah. I see you, Patrick, and I want to before I answer you, I want to go to Sean, because Sean looked like he was like ready to get in there and say.
Go ahead, Sean.
So, go ahead, Sean.
So I'm obviously one of the younger brothers here. So I've worked in the engineering field, and what I can say in my experience is really different from the older brothers, because they came into the workforce at a time where there was all kinds of implicit bias and a lot of obvious racism against our Black men. And so that's why Brother Craig was saying that we had to be that much better, work that much harder. And these days, when I go into whatever job I work, I'm only there looking at the perspective to do my best and not worry about anybody else. I'm only there to do my best. But that's just how the social climate has changed, though.
Right. And I think we, as being older, we have learned to, suppress, versus you all as younger, you go ahead and say what you're feeling versus, and so the age different. Patrick?
Yes. Okay. So, thank you for very much, and I apologize. I keep turning my phone, my camera off, is because I have to move the phone closer to me in order to hear, and I don't want to have you looking up in the sky. So I do apologize. But,
That's okay.
but getting back to one of the things that was said, I think that was brother. Where was he at? Where'd he go?
Craig.
Right.
I'm here.
Brother Craig. What he was saying was something that's very interesting because I believe when we talk about foundationally the progression of Black men in our country, we really have to start also understanding the parental styles that were developed. When we go back in history, and I'm not going to give everybody a history lesson, but for the audience and so forth, I really want them to be able to understand that a lot of the techniques for survival that were implemented throughout history really called for us to be more resilient, but also more closed off, especially for people of color, specifically Black men and Black women. But I think that it was very different for each gender as far as being Black. Black men that when they went out, they had to mask themselves. There's a poem by Paul Laurence Dunbar that I do a training on, and it talks about wearing the mask. Well, I don't believe, as the young brother was saying earlier, there are certain things that we had to mask in order for us to just coexist and to survive from a financial standpoint and to be that quote unquote breadwinner and become the head of the household. And I believe that our religion slash spirituality played a great deal in our development because we were taught, if you were brought up in a religious home or a Christian home, you were taught that, the meek shall inherit the earth, and you really had to have the function by the golden rule. But I say all of that to say that during this progression, um, the inability to share what we were feeling, which Ms. Mosby, you said that the younger generation, now they're able to articulate and share. There's a very thin line because we were sharing those things when Black men who had financial jobs and were able to hang out. I believe those conversations were shared, maybe not to the extent of being emotional or being intimate, but they were just shared from an understanding that for Black men, we kind of had this thing where we're saying, well, we know what you're going through. And even though we never revisited the traumas that we experienced, and not just at work, but even through our socialization, and that means being raised from boys to being men, it it became our little secret. It became something that we decided that it was not worthy for us to share because then it would compromise possibly our vision of masculinity. It really forced us to hide a part of us that was very pronounced and very vital to our survival and growth. But I don't believe, and this is not how we may have cognitively thought about it, but I believe that that was a part of us. Well, we can't show this. And the reason we can't show this is because it will put a creak in our armor or a crack in our being, which allows for people to then, at one point in time possibly take advantage of us. And we're not going to be nobody's punk. We're not going to be somebody's, we're not going to subscribe to being vulnerable because of the impact that it would have down the line as relates to our role. So it's interesting that we're talking about it, but we have masked so much of who we are that my belief is that sometimes we are so aware of who we think we are, but we're unaware of who we really are.
Well said. Well said. Well said. Um, so I think we might have touched on this a little bit before, but I'm going to go back into it. Fatherhood, the stereotype that Black men are not present in their children's lives. And just whoever wants to comment on that really can go ahead and just, I know a couple of you, like Craig said, your father was very positive in anything that you wanted to do. And he gave you that lift up.
Yeah. But yeah, with that said, though, as supportive as my father was, He wasn't a man that would say, I love you. I very rarely heard him say that, you know.
And Patrick, why is it, do you think that's hard for our men to say? Because my dad didn't say it either. I love you.
Well, I think that I think that you have to go back and look at the socialization of your parents during their time. Once again, this is where I made the statement earlier about when white boys grew into white men and black boys grew into black men. We were forced to subscribe and assimilate into this version of masculinity and manhood that was not really created for us or by us, but we were indoctrinated into it, which means we were kind of forced into it. And so in order to have this hardened shell to protect ourselves, I believe that part of saying I love you meant that there was a femininity to you that would be questioned, not necessarily because of your sexual orientation, but more so along the lines of that's a weakness, because if you show emotion, then there's a certain weakness. And that is one of the things I believe that hampered the ability for Black men to elevate in their working profession. Now, let me be very clear. That's not my perception. That's not what I believe. But I do understand that that is something that was forced upon it. So to say I love you to your son would ill prepare them for what comes after I love you, because that was only said to your wife or maybe to your daughters, because it was an emotion that you shared previously only with females, and females were able to share that with you. So I believe that that was part of the foundation of it, is that we had to prepare our sons to be as hard as we were to survive in our society the way that it has evolved and grown. And I believe that's when you see that changeover for even a younger generation, where fathers, just to answer your first question, fathers are more active and they're more emotional, even without the foundation of knowing how to engage in that conversation. I think this is a newer generation of children that have experienced fathers being emotionally available.
Okay.
Well, you know, that wasn't my reality with my father telling me he loved me, but it was something that I was able to express to my kids. I have two daughters and a son. And, you know, I try to tell them as much as I can that I love them. And they express that same emotion back. One of the things that I've noticed, though, particularly with like close friends in my network, friends and some frat brothers, we tell each other we love each other. And that's a phenomenon that I've just started noticing like the last 10 years as I've gotten older, and I've lost some friends, I've lost some fraternity brothers, you know, and you always say, you know, hey, you know, tell someone you love them before you can't do it anymore, you know, and I find myself, you know, not with everybody, you know, because I may not feel that way about everybody, but
don't say it if you don't mean it.
Right, exactly, right. I mean, but for you know, for the most part, you know, I do have a circle of fraternity brothers, a circle of friends that, you know, that we express that emotion, and I trust that it's a real emotion. So,
okay. And I'm sorry.
I was saying the other thing is that I believe it's a huge myth that Black men are not in their children's life. I think that's something that historically has been propagated in media. And if we look at the historical content of it, just from social services and things like that, what was the easiest way to destroy a nuclear Black family was to remove the male.
Right. And that's just one of those stereotypes that goes with, you know, where we can't keep a job, we're drug heads, you know. That's just one of those things that was put out there about Black men. So that unfortunate, but we have constantly proved it to be wrong. And so my next question is, and I'm just going to touch on this briefly, is being gay in the Black community. Do you feel offended? Do you feel threatened? comments, feedback?
Nope, I don't feel offended or threatened at all. I have brothers who are gay. I have family members who are gay. And it has nothing to do with my sexual orientation, nothing to do with my sexuality, because I know I'm straight and I love women. But I don't know. I believe firmly, not even necessarily from a religious standpoint, but from a human standpoint, you should love your brother, especially. You should love everybody the way they come. You know, whether they come
Exactly.
legless, whether they come armless, love them because maybe they're a nice person, or maybe they make you feel good. You know,
Right.
love,
Exactly. Exactly.
in that
I'm going to have to admit, through my, upbringing and my socialization, the homosexual lifestyle at one time was something I was completely, absolutely against. I didn't understand it. I, from my upbringing, that was something that was like taboo, and
Thank you for being honest.
people were made, uh, guys in particular, they were made fun of, and things happened to them in my environment. It wasn't something that was accepted. But as I grew older, I often say that when Barack Obama, when he was in his presidency, a very similar conversation he was having about the homosexual lifestyle and how he feels about it. One of the things that I keep with me that he said is he has evolved from where he was to where he is. And I see myself in a very similar way. From where I was to where I am now, it's much different than 20, 25 years ago, where, or later, that I did not accept it. I did not see it as something that was being constructive. But now I do feel much differently about that. I'm more accepting of that. And I have gay friends, gay friends at church in particular, and even in our fraternity. And they're some of the nicest guys in the world. And with that said, I realized that I have been wrong in thinking some of the things that I was socialized to think about the gay lifestyle. So
Thank
I have evolved and still evolving.
Thank you, Mr. Fritz. It
That
takes a
lifestyle.
lot to admit that. Thank you so much. Patrick, your feedback?
Yeah, so I wanted to say something really quick before I get into the LGBTQ plus discussion. Statistically, more Black men are involved in their father's lives, even though they are not in the same household. And there's a whole other discussion that we could actually talk about when it comes to that. But getting back to the LGBTQ plus community, I believe that one of the challenges um, for Black men, and I'm 47, so I'm in Generation X, so and so at one point in time, it was one of those things where you knew about it, but it did not directly impact or affect me personally. So it was a situation for me, at least, that said that people have the right themselves to choose to live their lives the way they want to, as long as it doesn't infringe upon mine. Now, going through that process, I believe that the fear that was part of the anger that was maybe portrayed or put on to those that were Black men that were in that are part of that community. I believe the fear was it made another individual seem like they were not as masculine or not as secure in who they were, because of the perception that if I have these friends, then there is a old saying that birds of a feather. And I think that in order for us to get past that, we really had to individualize our thought process in order for us to understand that whoever I choose to be intimately engaged with, not sexually, but intimately engaged with on a friendship, does not constitute me being that person. It is the relationship that we have that allows for us to engage. And I think that, as some of us have said, it's an evolving process. Some of us were more comfortable than others initially, but I believe that as we became more secure and more grounded in who we are as individuals, it allows for us to be more open to accepting people for who they are. Because there are certain things probably about our own lifestyles that people may not subscribe to, if that, whatever that may be. If you are making a choice to do something that other people may not agree with, you still want them to accept you because that's just a part of who you are. And I believe that a lot of it had to do with fear and concern about how they may be perceived in supporting or even in having those relationships or friendships with those individuals.
By the way, there are, in that whole evolving thing, when I was assessing that, years ago, there were heterosexual lifestyles that you just mentioned. There were heterosexual lifestyles that I did not agree with either. And it's kind of hypocritical to feel that way, but accepting of the heterosexual lifestyles more so than the homosexual lifestyle. It really, it didn't add up to me. So I just needed to be accepting of everyone, no matter what they, no matter what they prefer or what their, lifestyle is. How do you relate to me? Are we friends? Can we be friends? Can we relate to each other? It's more in my life now, it's more so that kind of dynamic more than the dynamics of the past.
Well, I was a teenager growing up in the 70s. That lifestyle definitely was not acceptable. And that was my perception, all the way up until I was well into adulthood. My brother is gay. And I did not, I felt a way about that. I still loved him, but I felt a way about it. But, that ancient way of thinking for me has long dissipated. And, I love my brother to death. I too have friends and cousins and frat brothers that are gay, and I don't look at them any differently. I accept them for who they are, and how they are as a human being. That's what I look at. I look at how they are as a human being versus their sexual orientation. So.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your honesty. The next one is kind of like a taboo question. I just want to give you a little story before I bring the question. We had some friends, family over to our home. And so we're sitting at the table and, I've cooked and you have your feet up under my table eating the food that I've just prepared. And we're in a conversation. And so the conversation led by one of my guests was the fact that there is nothing that a Black woman can do for me. And I kind of had to, what did you just say? Because I'm thinking, my question was to him, which I knew the answer, is your mother not Black? And so the taboo on the Black men versus Black women versus white women. What is it about some of the Black men that feel that they have to be with that white woman versus not being with the Black woman? Marcus, I could see your face just.
Unfortunately, I've heard this conversation from other Black men who either I went to school with and have had to correct. And I've used that same token. Is your mother not Black? But I think for some of them, they consider that to be the trophy. I think that some men or Black men are intimidated by Black women. And so therefore, they take that lesser role. I've heard where it's, oh, white women are easier than black women. There are certain standards that black women set that some men aren't willing to go through. Um, but to say that there's nothing that they can offer you is kind of hard to fathom. But I know at the same
To me,
token,
it's disrespectful.
it is.
That's what it is to
It
me.
truly is. And we also have to look at the dynamic of what has been going on in the world today, that there are some women who believe that they don't need a man. And I'm not saying that either one of us need each other, but when we set that stereotype of, oh, I don't need you, and that comes off, you're kind of offending the black men as well. So they see that as a, oh, well, you don't want a black man either, so let me go to this side or let me go here. And I think it also has to do with how you're raised. You know, I have biracial cousins who are black and Puerto Rican. They're married to white women. And they see it as, I have an open opportunity. My father is Puerto Rican. My mom is black. I can date whoever I want because I don't have those constraints. So anybody who says that a black woman doesn't have anything to offer is essentially self-hating themselves.
Right. And that's true. You could date whoever you want to date, but to put it in that, put that comment is, so disrespectful. Sean?
So my take on it is that I have nothing against any other race at all. You know, I believe everybody's beautiful. I especially love my black women because I came from one. And there was a point in time in my life where I enjoyed the other races or whatever. You know, that was cool, that was good. But at the end of the day, I realized as I got older, there is nobody on this earth that's going to understand me more than a black woman. And to sit there and try to get that out of another woman is just near impossible. It's just not really going to work for me. They can try to how can I say, portray the culture of what a black woman goes through. You know, the culture of black women being from America, that is. But it's just not the same because, well, one, it's not authentic, and yeah, it's just not authentic. So I definitely love my black women, and I don't like the disrespect that that is given toward black women in the regard that you have spoken, because, well, it's just not right because, you know, most of black folk that do that, you know, they come from a black woman. Why would you say that about your moms? You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Well, I think Marcus hit it on the head when he said it's a form of self-hate. You know, when you have that perception of black women, and it's selfishness as well. You know, typically a black man that says something like that, you know, they have personal agendas and what they're trying to get out of life, and feel that white woman is going to help them get there, better or faster than a sister. But, you know, I haven't had that experience. I love black women, you know, as everybody on here has attest. I think, again, I agree with Marcus. It's a form of self-hate, you know.
Patrick?
Yeah. So I think the thing that I really I want to kind of stress here is that, as I said earlier, black men are not monolithic in their experiential activities, meaning they don't all have the same train of thought. There are foundational things I think that are, let's say collectively, most black men can agree on. But one of the things that I think with regard to self-hate, and them not having the level of respect for maybe their mother, grandmother, aunts, whoever, there, I believe, tend to be reasons or rationale that are personal in their preference to actually engage or choose to be with someone of a different race. I don't know if it's that they hate themselves, because that would entail for us to believe that they have a certain level of understanding of themselves as black men. And this is not to say that they can't consciously do it, but I don't know if those men that have married or have said the statements that you said, there's nothing a black woman can do for me, I don't think that they can conceptualize the things that you just did for them when you have cooked and you have prepared a meal for them and they have actually sat at your table. I don't believe that they have viewed that as a Black woman or a white woman. They just view that as a woman, you know, doing what they're doing. Now, when I say this, once again, I'm trying to understand the premise, because the truth of the matter is that Black men will become sexually intimate with white women, but a majority of those Black men typically don't marry white women statistically. Now there's a percentage, and I can't remember what the percentage is. I did some research on interracial relationships and marriages as a therapist, because I wanted to be able to make sure that I was versed. It's been a couple of years, but most men, most Black men that have dated outside of their race, whether it be sexually or intimately, they typically don't marry those individuals, statistically. Now, for those to say that there's nothing a Black woman can do for them, that is based upon their experience, that's based upon their perception. And as much as we may not agree, I myself definitely don't agree, but I believe that for them, there is a rational reason, no matter how irrational it may be to myself. That's what they are using to justify their actions. But I think it's because of lack of understanding of the challenges and the atrocities that our mothers, our grandmothers, our aunts and uncles, our aunts have faced over the course of their life that lead them to that. Because if you find someone that you love, regardless of skin, then that's someone you love. But if you're saying that there's nothing that a Black woman can't do for you, that takes it to a whole different level. That has nothing to do with you falling in love with a person of a different color. That is you saying that you don't recognize the value of a Black woman. And I believe that's where you can say there's self-hate, but I don't even know if that's something that they understand about self-hate. I think it's something that they hate, and their reasoning for that can be traced to a specific situation or circumstance. So I do understand the premise, but I guess for me as a clinician, one of the things I think about is what is the trauma that has been experienced in their relationships with Black women that have led them to that? And a lot of them have some very challenging stories that they've used to generalize and has made that about all Black women, as opposed to the relationship that caused them to be traumatized or to be injured emotionally, which has led them away from Black women. And once again, this is not in all cases, but in many cases where I've done relationships with Black men that have engaged or dated outside of their race, particularly white women, they have shared in the confines of a therapy session.
Does anybody else want to add to?
I kind of wanted to agree with what Patrick was saying, but when he was like, I'm sorry, brother. Can you repeat the last few lines about when you were saying about the experiences with the young ladies? Like your experiences might not have been as good with the Black young ladies as you might have liked them to, and there could be so many reasons as to why. And that one personally resonated with me, especially when I was a 9th, 10th grader in high school, because I've always been so different. And that's when I mixed myself into the wrong crowd. Just to try to get that pool of more females, Black females who look just like me, that are, pretty, that I really wanted. But I realized it was like, well, the experience that I had was they chose a certain type of young man, and I was different.
Yeah. So what I was saying, Sean, is that I'm not gonna say most men, individuals themselves are able to process through, and they can get into relationships that are healthy, and when they dissolve, you still have a good connection, or you can remember something that attracted you to those individuals. But what tends to happen if it's been so scarring or continuous in your interactions or relationships, then what they may typically do is they may internalize that bad relationship, and they may look at a string of bad interactions that they say, well, once that easy person comes along, and that person that I can identify with, then that makes it more acceptable for me to move forward, and I'm able to continue to do that. And so that may lead them to a certain level of saying, okay, well, this is the individuals that have shown me the attention, that have shown me the compassion, caring, and all of the things that I've thought about. But I think ultimately what tends to happen is they generalize that. And once they start generalizing that to all women, then they start recognizing that, hey, there's nothing that a Black woman can do for me that a white woman can't, or my person that I've chosen to be with can. So I will continue to move that way. I think that, but that's the reason why I don't know if that's self-hate as much as it is um, personal trauma that they've experienced in those relationships. Because let's be honest, as Black men, when we are emotionally hurt, it is very difficult for us to recover without there being a process for us to heal from a situation. And during those teenage years, there have been, it's very, very difficult, because between 6th grade and I say to about 12th grade, that's a very, very, if we're not the cool kid, if we're not the kid that got the clout and the popularity, and back in my day it was the clothes and the shoes and all of the things that may have attracted the women that we're pursuing to us, melanated complexion.
Okay, I do have a question here. One of the viewers, as we have gone through the 2020, dealing with several the pandemic, the corona, social injustice, financial restraint, and change to our normal, what have we done to maintain your wellness, your mental, your physical, emotional, and spiritual health? What have some of you done?
Reading, working out, doing work, playing the game. I don't know. The coronavirus has been such a safe place, if you will. It really has, bro. I can
A lot of people say
be on
that.
my own. I can do what I need to do, get my work done. I ain't got no distractions. I get my work done. I'd work on things that mean the most to me. I work on my body. I go to the doctor when I need to, and I think it's really, coronavirus has been really good for stuff like that. Just the staying inside aspect.
I've heard other people say that as well. In today's society, Black men's mental health is the most neglected. A lot of them don't realize that we have people like Patrick, where they could go to, and only approximately a fourth of the Black men seek help, and 40% of white men. And our suicide rate for the Black man, starting at a younger age, has climbed drastically. So in summation of that, Patrick, if you could just give us what we could do to educate everyone, the men on our panel, the people that will see this recording, not only, and I don't want to take this to just at this point now, because it happens on both sides. It happens on to Black men, Black women, our young Black men. We just lost a person in our family from, well, actually 2 people in our family from self-inflicted killings. And so, well, deaths rather. And I wanted to make sure that we as a community know that there are people like you that we could go to and talk to, and you will understand, you know, knowing that we have someone like you to understand what we're going through. You know, it's hard to go to someone that is not us and try to express what we're feeling, because they'll look at you like, I'm sorry, I don't get it. But when, you know, you go to someone that looks like you, they get it. So Patrick, if you could just tell us, you know, give us some guidance.
Okay, so a lot of times when it comes first, let's try to look at it from the statistic standpoint. Obviously, for the more mature generation, our generation, suicide was quote unquote known as that's a white person thing. But as things have transitioned and things have changed, it has become more acceptable for and I think that part of this may be because of the assimilation or the acculturation of our Black families and Black men and women into mainstream culture. Because the reality is more women attempt suicide than men, but more men are more successful. And so one of the things that I think that we have to be more active in, especially with young Black men or people that commit suicide in general, is to be able to really try to recognize and become aware of some telltale signs that, from my experience as a clinician, really are attributed to a lot of depression, undiagnosed depression, and then the changes in an individual's habits of personal choices and decisions of life. Typically, if it's more of an acute, meaning an immediate suicide attempt or a suicidal, process, it typically means that it has been building up over the course of an extended period of time. So a lot of times I believe that it's as Black men and as Black women, we really have to stay in tune with our family, our children, and being able to recognize the changes that are going on within their life, closing themselves off, seeking isolation, changes in their sleep patterns, changes in their eating patterns, their the choices and who they choose to hang out with. Because I believe that some of that, especially like younger Black teenagers, Black males and females, I think one of the biggest challenges is that with life and the way it's been constructed, we really sometimes don't feel like we have the time to see the changes that are occurring. So I believe that the first step is just recognizing when children start to change, specifically young Black males, because once again, they have a higher rate of success. I think the other thing is being constantly engaged with them as relates to just things such as how are they doing? Asking those questions, the same questions that when we were at our darkest time, no one were able to ask us. I think that that's part of the process, excuse me, that we have to initiate and start to engage. And that means there has to be an intimate emotional connection that goes beyond just the good things of like, hey, let's go to do this, let's go to do that, let's do these things together. Those are great, but we still have to be aware of their daily life, especially because one of the things in my experience is that most of the time as Black men, we don't like to talk. We've never seen or never had someone model to us the ability to be engaged and have that conversation. And as a Black therapist, a Black male therapist, I'm like a unicorn. There's quite a few of us out there, but then to talk about things from a clinical or pathological standpoint, a pathology standpoint, excuse me, there is a level of understanding and education that we have to be able to, even if we don't go as far as becoming clinicians. Just having that dialogue, just having that conversation, those are the things that I think that are part of it. And when you find yourself in those situations, you have to be able to understand that you reach out. I'm a member of the National Association of Black Social Workers. I'm on, Black Therapists Rock. These are all social organizations that are outside of the profession. But we have to be able to market and be mindful that these things exist. And we have to do the research, even if it's not for ourselves, but so that we can have a better understanding of the dynamics that our younger generations are facing, and they don't have to face them alone.
Okay, thank you so much, Patrick. This was so productive, and I would like to continue because I think we're going to get a lot of feedback from this. But I do want to thank everyone for participating today, the Iota Phi Theta Fraternity, Patrick Crawford, our therapist, and I would just want to let everyone know, don't forget to vote. Your life depends on it. My name is Marie Bryant Mosby, and I thank you all so much for spending the evening with me on My Life's Purpose. Everyone have a blessed night. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
You have a good
You
one.
guys were awesome.